Jesus said, "Those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed. When they are disturbed, they will marvel and will reign over all."
Have you ever wondered why the authors of the Torah, the Bible, or the Koran never revealed the exact location of the most sacred mountain, the home of the all-powerful God? Was it because they considered it irrelevant, or was it deliberately concealed? If so, what was the purpose of this cover-up? What might the authors and religious leaders be hiding from us? Isn't it intriguing that none of these texts mention the Great Pyramids either? The Jews ruled Lower Egypt for almost a century as the Hyksos rulers, and these were certainly the most magnificent structures of that time. Are we also to believe that Joseph, the son of Jacob, who lived in Heliopolis, modern-day Cairo, as high priest, never visited or spoke of them? Could it be that we were purposefully misled about the location of Mount Sinai after the crossing of the Red Sea, just as we were misled into believing the event was an exodus rather than the expulsion of the Hyksos? We are here to assemble the missing pieces of the puzzle and present you with a preliminary theory. Let's begin by exploring the biblical description of Mount Sinai, which isn't very detailed. In Exodus 19:23, which says, "The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, 'Set bounds around the mountain and consecrate it.'" This verse presents an unusual picture of a mountain with borders that cannot be touched, almost as if the base is a steep cliff rather than a gentle slope. It also implies that the mountain is small enough to be fenced off, preventing anyone from getting too close. This suggests that Mount Sinai is relatively small but rises dramatically from the surrounding plains. Now let's look at another biblical description that seems to detail the base of the mountain. Exodus 24:10 says, "And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet as it were a paved work of sapphire stone, and it was like the very heavens in its clarity." This passage describes the base of the mountain with a peculiar pavement that resembles the night sky. The term clearness refers to luster, hinting that the sapphire stone might look like polished black basalt with white quartz. Many people believe Moses merely climbed Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments, but consider the possibility that he actually descended into the mountain itself. Let's explore what the scriptures say. In Exodus 24:15 it reads, "Then Moses went up into the mountain, and a cloud covered the mountain." And further in Exodus 24:18 it says, "So Moses went into the midst of the cloud and went up into the mountain. And Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Notice the use of "into the mountain. This suggests there was an entrance or passageway leading inside the mountain. Here, we also encounter the first mention of the number 40, which we will revisit shortly. Now, let's consider the Koran, which introduces yet another dimension to this puzzle. It implies that this passageway led downwards into the depths of the mountain to a cave at the bottom. It says, "When God suspended the mountain over them as though it were a shadow, for they feared that it was falling down on them, God said, 'Hold fast to that which he has given you and bear in mind what it contains. When you depart from them and their idols, go to the cave for shelter. God will extend to you his mercy and prepare for you a means of safety." Although the Quran can be challenging to interpret, this passage seems to suggest that the initiate, possibly Moses, had to hold onto a rope as he was lowered into Mount Sinai. The phrase, "hold fast to that which he has given you and bear in mind what it contains," could translate to "hold fast to the rope, and remember that God resides in the cave at the bottom of this passageway." So not only was there a passageway into Mount Sinai, but this journey also involved descending into the mountain, potentially to a sacred cave. Josephus, who was a first-century Jewish historian and scholar, claimed his sources came from books taken from the Temple of Jerusalem after its fall in AD 70. This makes his information potentially older and more authoritative than any existing copies of the Torah. Josephus provides extra details that often support his claims. Regarding Mount Sinai, he writes, "He ascended up to Mount Sinai, which is the highest of all the mountains in that country. It is not only very difficult to be ascended by men, on account of its vast altitude, but because of the sharpness of its precipices. Besides, it was terrible and inaccessible, on account of the rumor that God dwelt there." Let's analyze all these descriptions to determine if they could possibly match the Great Pyramid of Giza. Sharp and difficult to climb. The Great Pyramid is both sharp and steep. Small enough to be fenced off. It rises very suddenly from the surrounding pavement area and is relatively small for a mountain. Highest in the land. It is the tallest structure in Egypt. On the edge of a desert, the Great Pyramid is located on the edge of the desert. Surrounded by a black basalt pavement, this matches the pavement surrounding the Great Pyramid. Now, let's consider the biblical account of the Israelites' wanderings in Sinai. According to the Bible, about 500,000 Israelites wandered the Sinai Peninsula for 40 years. The number 40 is symbolic and appears repeatedly in the Bible. King David reigned for 40 years. King Solomon reigned for 40 years. Jesus fasted for 40 days and nights, and the Israelites wandered for 40 years. Interestingly, the Great Pyramid's dimensions offer a numerical explanation. The pyramid is a 40 times copy of the pi fraction. An approximation of pi is derived from 22.7, and the Great Pyramid's dimensions are 880, 280 cubits, an exact 40 times copy of the pi ratio of 22.7. Additionally, the idea of wandering around is reflected in modern religious practices, like the perambulation of Christian reliquaries and the circumnavigation of the Kaaba in Mecca. These rituals echo ancient processions around the pyramids. Digging deeper, we find that the Israelites were a powerful faction in Lower Egypt during the 13th to 17th dynasties, known as the Hyksos rulers. They gained control of the Giza Plateau and its sacred ceremonies by defeating the original supervisors, the troglodytes or Horim, in a military campaign. This event is preserved in the biblical account of Esau's defeat of the troglodytes. The Bible doesn't explain why the Israelites would want to slaughter a tribe of cave dwellers. But knowing these troglodytes controlled access to the sacred chambers of the Giza pyramids makes the scenario clear. With their defeat, the Israelites became the guardians of the Giza Plateau and its sacred chambers. The sacred Israelite mountain that housed their all-powerful deity was called Sinai, possibly the Great Pyramid itself. Considering these descriptions, the Great Pyramid of Giza emerges as a plausible candidate for Mount Sinai. It matches key characteristics: steepness, size, height, desert location, and surrounding basalt pavement. The symbolic use of the number 40 in biblical texts and the pyramid's dimensions reinforce this connection. Historical context further supports this theory. The Israelites, as Hyksos rulers, controlled the Giza Plateau after defeating the troglodytes, who guarded the sacred chambers of the pyramids. This suggests the Great Pyramid itself might have been the sacred mountain housing their deity, called Sinai. The concealment of this knowledge may be linked to the Hyksos rewriting of history after their expulsion. The parallels between Moses' story and the emerald tablets of Thoth hint at deeper, hidden truths. While we can only speculate, the connections are compelling and invite further exploration into these ancient mysteries.